Our next guest is the author of a book, but our next guest is the fourth generation descendant of the last traditional hereditary shaman chief of the Harpy Eagle. We're talking Arawaks here. This is such a fascinating background to our next guest. His name is Damon Corrie. He's the author of the book, The Last Arawak Girl, Born in Barbados, 17th Century Tale. Good morning to you, Damon.
Hi, good morning, Pearson.
You have such a rich story to tell. I'm fascinated by it simply because I descend from an African, but you're descending from the Arawaks. So how did you trace it?
Well, we are always aware of our heritage because, Granny lived to be 99 years old.
Hmm.
The family, our history, our oral history is well known to all the elders, and it's not something that we discovered late in life. It's something that all of us grew up knowing, as a fact, who we are, where we come from.
So growing up knowing that you are an Arawak, you came from the Arawak tribe, how did that make you feel as a boy, and how does it make you feel now as a man?
Well, I'd say from secondary school. Because in primary school, what I did notice, kids they weren't interested in, your ethnicity or this, are you my friend or not, and so that wasn't really an issue. But then the minute I went into secondary school, then I started to notice this back in the 80s. Unfortunately, that was still a time in Barbados where there was a lot less mixing of the different ethnicities than there is now. So identity started to come into the focus from then.
But
Uh,
mhm.
yeah, you go ahead.
We did history in secondary school, and we were told it is this history of the Arawaks and the Caribs, and there you are, your bosom bursting, because you know from where you've come. Did you feel at that time that your story as an Arawak was being told correctly?
Definitely not. That caused a lot of friction between the teachers and myself. It's very few of them were open-minded. Like Mr. Castani, he was very open-minded and wanted to
Hmm.
hear all points of view. But a lot of the other teachers were, more view you as, how dare you question what we're teaching you, you little
Hmm.
upstart. That kind of negative attitude. But I would be telling them things that, I am part of this tribe. I know my granny said X, Y, and Z. We did these things, not what, because that's another thing people don't realize. That all of the Caribbean histories were written, none of them were written by indigenous peoples themselves. They're all second, third, fourth hand accounts, by somebody who went to university and studied what some European long ago said about us. So why are you still holding on to that? These cherished myths and believing that them to be so true and worthy of continuation in our educational
Yeah.
system. And that's the kind of thing that needs to be redressed because that is one aspect of the lingering Eurocentric colonialism is still in our educational system. And that's something that I hope my book and the film work will start to address and redress.
So you decided, because all the while you always wanted to write, you just wanted to correct that history, you wanted to tell the tale. But you're now at the point where you have done so. You've written now the book, The Last Arawak Girl, Born in Barbados, a 17th Century Tale. How true is this, and where did you find this girl, this last girl born in Barbados?
Well, it's a kind of a complicated story of being. Um, that's why I described it in the Nation article as being a fact-filled work of fiction. Fiction in the sense that it is based on a spiritual visitation, a vision that my daughter had last year. She's 14 now, but she was 13 last year, Laliwa, when she had her 9 day long puberty ritual, traditional Arawak puberty ritual here in Barbados. And that's the first time that that has known to have been done in our recorded history. And after she passed through that important, which is probably the most important rite of passage for a Lokono-Arawak female in their life, is because you're transitioning from being a girl to being a woman.
Hmm.
So anyway, she was staying with friends on the East Coast after her puberty ritual, and the spirit of an Arawak girl appeared to her. She was afraid at first, but then later in the night, the girl's spirit came back in her dreams and had a conversation with her. So this whole book is based on what that spirit of Arawak girl told my daughter. As she had mentioned that she was the last one born, and she died just after a puberty ritual, and they were surviving in the Scotland district area of Barbados, hiding from the settlers. And this was up until 1664 when their little family encampment was discovered. And the reason why I say it's fiction because no one can prove something like that. It's a
Yes.
spiritual experience. You either believe it or you don't believe it. But then I started to look into the colonial records, and I noticed a lot of discrepancies and a lot of things that point to what she was saying being true. Because at that time last year, she had said that they were living in higher peaks in Barbados in that area, and previously the historians were saying that there's no evidence found of any inland Arawak villages here. They were all on the coast. But
Mm-hmm.
earlier this year, they found remains of a settlement on Cherry Tree Hill. So that got me looking a little deeper into different things, and the we have to remember, although Captain Paul, when he came in 1627, he swore that the island was uninhabited.
Yes.
Remember several facts. He landed on the west coast. 2 weeks after landing here in February 1627, then he went to Guyana to seek crops to bring back here to plant,
Mm-hmm.
and he also brought back 40 Arawaks from Guyana. And Powell, in his own admissions, he said that 40 Arawaks volunteered to come with him back to Barbados to teach the settlers how to plant like cassava and tobacco and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But another English contemporary, a chronicler by the name of Scott, he said no, Powell was disingenuous, and actually the Dutch governing Guyana persuaded an Arawak family to accompany him back, thinking that within a year or two they would be let go back home. But they were actually, after they taught the settlers here all they needed to know, they were then promptly enslaved and denied the right to return to Guyana, which caused a lot of trouble back there with the Arawaks almost ready to go into revolt because they wanted their people back. But fast forward into Barbados, there was many decades after 1627 before the first settlers even started to penetrate the Scotland district forest. By 1665, they had finished denuding the arable good flat land of Barbados, the rest of the country then, of all its forest. But that part of the island remained, and it's still to this day, we have the Turner's Hall Woods. It's still the last stand of original forest that was never touched by an axe. And some people say, well, how could a small group of Arawaks survive over there on the East Coast without being detected in those early decades?
Mm-hmm.
Because we are viewing Barbados from the prison of the modern day. You have to remember, in that time there was very few settlers, and their African slaves they later brought, and they were mostly on the west and south coast. No ships
Right.
docked anywhere on the east coast of
Yes.
Barbados until several decades after Paul's landing. So how would they have known who was in that area?
Mm-hmm.
For anyone who doubts the ability of people who were experts of hiding in jungles to survive there, in our modern era, everybody can remember Winston Hall
Mm-hmm.
escaped and was living out in that same area successfully for
Yes.
for quite a long time. And this is with a modern police force and army and latest technology, and he still evaded them. So I remain convinced that there is merit to being open-minded towards the
Mm-hmm.
very real possibility that what the spirit told my daughter could very well be true.
Be true. And so you've documented it in the book, The Last Arawak Girl Born in Barbados, a 17th century tale. But you've also been able to now move it from the page onto film. Let's talk about that project.
Yes, that was unexpected as well. Also, as you know, when I was a little boy, I'm sure like you and many other Bajan boys were watching cowboy and Indian movies, and you're saying that it didn't really ring true the portrayal, but also there are two things: I wanted to be in a film, and I wanted to do films about the Caribbean indigenous peoples because I knew from growing up about Chatoyer in St. Vincent and Chief
Mm-hmm.
Carib Warner from Dominica, Hatway in Cuba, and so on and so forth. And they say, there are literally no films that I can access or I know about made about any of them.
Mm-hmm. I
And
can't
so
wait to see. Is it still a work in progress?
the the TV version, documentary version, is actually completed and it'll be released next week. Which is you're seeing cuts from that now. That's
Yes.
just under half an hour. I'll be giving CBC a free copy of that as soon as I get it.
Great.
But we are working on a cinema quality 90-minute full feature length movie,
Mm-hmm.
which will incorporate a lot more actors and of course a lot more costs. So
Of course.
we're fundraising on GoFundMe to get that funds, but we've got the Ministry of Culture has offered to assist us with that
Yeah.
as well.
Well, I just hope it all comes to fruition really soon, but we can't wait to get our hands on a book. Quickly, just tell me, where can we get a copy of the book, The Last Arawak Girl Born in Barbados?
Right, currently it's only available at Cloister bookstores in
Mm-hmm.
Bridgetown and Sheraton.
Right. So cloistered.
Yeah,
All right, great.
yeah.
Damon, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a fascinating tale. I think it's fascinating enough for us to get a copy of the book and look out for the film really, really. So serious as a judge. I'm serious. Just to learn more and the truth of our history as well is so good. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.